I know the video title might seem like the most obvious thing ever, but there is a point being made here, and that point is one that is largely overlooked by the competitive Pokemon player base. Even experienced players overlook it. Now, they might do it more willfully to protect their ego or whatever, but for most people, I would say that they're just genuinely not thinking about it as much. And this is a really, really important point to keep in mind when evaluating the game of Pokemon. So, the basic idea, as described beautifully and succinctly by my friend and one of the best players ever, CL, a long time ago when I was complaining about hacks, he said, look at it like this. Let's say that you have a clean game. And this replay that we're going to use as an example of a clean game will call into question the existence of a clean game, at least a little bit. Maybe we redefine it. But let's just say there's a clean game, and you have the game won if you hit Draco Meteor. Should you win that game every time? And then I realized, no, because Draco Meteor has a 90% hit rate. So you are not, because people will say, I have a guaranteed win if Draco Meteor hits. True, okay, but that doesn't mean you have a guaranteed win. That means you have a 90% win, And that's the basic gist, is that Pokemon is very rarely about guaranteeing you win the game. If you click Earthquake 5 times and win, then yeah, that's guaranteed, because it can't miss. Barring other circumstances, but for simplicity's sake. Yeah, then that's guaranteed. But before you get into that position of clicking Earthquake 5 times for the win, then there's probably some form of variance that could have occurred just by virtue of how much potential for variance there is in so many turns in Pokemon. And when we think of a clean game, we think, oh, well, variance didn't pop up on throughout most of the game, so it was clean, right? Well, think of this as well. Let's say that you need to avoid a critical hit to win, right? If it's just one turn, then yeah, okay, it's unlucky because it's only a 6.25% chance to get crit in Gens 2 through 6. And it's lower than that in 7 and 8 and 9, but I don't care what that one is. But that's only over one turn. Over 2 turns, it's not that much bigger, but it is bigger. And over 3 turns, then it gets bigger. And you see where I'm going with this. That it's not just about any one turn. It's when you look at the game as a whole. So yes, you could have that guaranteed win at turn 40 when you click Earthquake 5 times. But before then, there were probably, or actually no, not probably, there were a bunch, almost certainly, a bunch of things that could have gone differently depending on how the RNG was feeling that day. And to illustrate this point, let's look at this game, because I don't think anyone could make the case that this battle we're about to watch was a hacksy one. There was very little RNG interference in this game, right? So at least there was very little RNG interference overall, and what little there was did not really impact the game's outcome, right? So we'll just look at it quickly first, and then we'll go more in depth just to illustrate the point that's being made. Okay, so there's a switch, and there's another switch. No hacks possible there, right? Cool. Rocks, no hacks possible there. EQ into Thunderous, no hacks possible there, right? Okay, so now Latios gets hit by U-turn. That could have crit, but didn't. Okay, but still no hacks happening. U-turn didn't crit. Mamoswine makes a great prediction, EQs the Keldeo, and that doesn't crit. So no hacks there. Keldeo goes for Scalds, no burn, and no crit either. So no hacks happening at all so far. Zam, Rapid Spin, even Rapid Spin doesn't crit. Not that that would be a significant thing, because not every instance of RNG is hacks, obviously. Is significant hacks, obviously. But a lot of the times we tend to block out all the stuff that could. That's the whole point of this video, because it's so easy to just defend your ego and say, oh, there's nothing I could have done, I got brutally hacked. Or when you win clean, or when you win, then saying, oh no, yeah, I totally had that. without any help from the RNG, and then you look back at it and if you're honest with yourself and you're aware of this, because a lot of people just aren't aware of it, they're not necessarily just defending their ego, then you look back at a lot of games and you realize how fortunate you were with the RNG, not necessarily because you got 16 critical hits or something, but in that you avoided the RNG popping up, even though there were a lot of opportunities for it to do so. That's why when you play competitive Pokemon, you are playing for a percentage chance to win. Even if you're incredibly favored. The horror stories of people losing to 1 in 6 million chances are plenty. But there's so much that happens in the game before that affects what's happening. Now, I'm not saying that, it's never right to complain about hacks in Pokemon. Yeah, okay, we play a silly game. But it's important to consider just how much RNG there is. Even something like, man, I'm really lucky I didn't get crit there, then that might be significant if your opponent was getting a lot of chances to crit. So, when it's significant, obviously. So, something like a Tentacle Rapid Spin critting the... Actually, you know what? If Rapid Spin crit, then it's Alakazam is more... might be in range of CB Mamoswine Ice Shard. So, no, yeah, that Rapid Spin could have been crit, and it could have been significant, funny as that is. Protect, no hacks there. No RNG there, rather. Ferrothorn comes in. Psychic doesn't crit and doesn't drop Spadef. Either of those would have been big, but instead Alakazam switches out. No, that could have very well changed what happened, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself as I tend to. But no hacks takes place there as Ferrothorn sets up spikes. No hacks possible there. Spikes again, same deal. Thundurus comes in. Keldeo is sacrificed. No hacks possible there. Focus Blast doesn't even get a chance to miss. Latios comes in. Ferrothorn. Draco Meteor does not miss, and it does not crit. So, no RNG happening here. See, this is a very clean game so far. There's, no RNG at all. So, double switch to Thundurus. On the Lando coming in, great move. No RNG there. HP Ice goes off. Even if RNG happened there, then it wouldn't have changed anything, because Lando dies cleanly to HP Ice, so even if it crit, that didn't change anything. Now, Ferrothorn comes in again on the Latios, which Draco's does not crit or miss again. And now Politoed's going to switch into the -2 Draco and take decent damage, but not a lot, especially because it's getting weakened. Now it takes a -4 Draco and nothing. So Scald goes off, and it gets a burn. So there's our first instance of RNG. But, of course, Latios needed to crit another Draco Meteor in order to meaningfully do damage to Politoed. Politoed also could have protected. We don't know necessarily how it would have played out, because Latios can also miss Draco Meteor. But the odds were very much in Politoed's favor to come out on top and remain healthy enough to remain out of Alakazam range, which is what's significant here. So, we'll chalk that up to, a little favorable RNG, but nothing outlandish so far. So now Ferrothorn comes in, and Monai just goes right to Tentacruel. Power Whip hits, does good damage. Scald does not burn. Power Whip misses. That's pretty bad. But it's not really too... It's not going to be too game-changing, because the whole point is not to burn Ferrothorn and not for Tentacruel to keep hazards off permanently or anything like that. It's just to weaken Ferrothorn in a range for things like Mamoswine and Thundurus and Latios. So, even Politoed. So, Power Whip hits, another Scald doesn't burn, and so that's 3 Scalds, no burn from this Tentacruel. So after the Politoed burn, we'll call it fair, especially because one of the Power Whips did miss. And now 4th Scald, no burn, Power Whip hits again, Tentacruel goes down, but it's in Mamoswine range, EQ, free KO, Alakazam comes in, Ferrothorn sack, no hacks going to be changing anything there, because that EQ critting Ferrothorn obviously does nothing. Now, there can be hacks here in that Ice Shard can crit Mamoswine, can crit Zam and KO it, but it doesn't, and Psychic KOs it cleanly, and now Latios comes into, T-Tar comes into Latios, and Surf does not crit, second Surf does not crit, and Crunch KOs Latios. Politoed comes in, protects for extra health. Also guards against an unlikely Custat Berry. Alakazam comes in. Psychic just barely comes up short, and Politoed wins the game. But even if Politoed died, then Zam would have had to crit Thundurus. So, clean game, right? Now, I'm not disputing that this was a clean game, but I'm saying that if we go back and look at how much RNG is possible on any given turn, then over the course of a game, it is likely that stuff is going to start happening. There's a reason why if you go to the replay thread of Smogon's biggest tournament, the Smogon Premier League, where all the players come out for the biggest team tournament around, and you have to try your best so you don't let down your teammates and all that stuff. There's a reason why if you go through the replays of those threads, there is RNG all over the place. Because it's not just, Pokemon was feeling particularly sadistic today. It's that on any given turn, so much could happen. And it's not necessarily about changing the outcome, because that's so hard to really map out, but it's more about how it changes how the game is played. This is why little hacks winds up being really impactful a lot of the time. Like, I remember a few years ago, there were some players who were consistently getting really lucky, not in that they were just hacking their opponent's lights out the whole time, or that they robbed a game that they had no business winning. Not stuff like that, but they consistently got so many little things that it made it pretty much impossible for the opponent to keep up. You know, like even resisted Thunderbolts would crit constantly, and then that would get the opponent's Pokemon in range way quicker. Little things like that, which you think, oh, that's not such a big deal, but it does add up. And that's the whole point, that there's so much variance flying around all over the place, and all of it has to be considered. Not just, there weren't crits for 30 turns, and then there were 2 crits on the last 2 turns. Like, yeah, okay, that sucks, but think about all the stuff that could have gone wrong significantly, of course, before that. So let's go back again. So we're skipping the first few turns where there's no hacks possible, right? So now Thundurus comes in. If this U-turn crits Latios, then it's, then Monai is way out in front. It doesn't KO it. Let's just tack on another 40, but it brings it down to 8. So that means that Latios is dead to Stealth Rock. So Mamoswine comes in, chases it out, and either Latios stays in and dies, or it switches out and it's nothing more than death fodder later. That alone is huge. I mean, I know the odds aren't big for Latios to take that crit, obviously. It's just one move on one turn, but that's the whole point. Like, at any point, this kind of stuff can strike, and as the game goes on, more and more of these little occurrences are going to add up, because it's not just, will U-turn crit on this one turn, it's, will U-turn crit on this one turn, or will Monai get 1 crit out of 3 attacks, total, any of which would be majorly significant. That's what I'm talking about. It's not necessarily just about this one, even though this one would be absolutely enormous. But it's more about, or like this one, either he EQs the Keldeo, which is a great move, but if he crits that one, then that's also way more significant. That's one, and Crucify can't threaten anymore. So, like, let's say that Crucify didn't, if you want to complain that Crucify doesn't get the Scald Burn, I don't know why you would, but let's just say, it's like, well, he did have to dodge a crit in order to switch in safely in the first place. Now, I'm not saying that if he did get unlucky, he would be unjustified in complaining, but if you want to improve at the game, you really gotta, I mean, look, there are obviously a lot of cases in Pokemon where these kinds of things are unavoidable, right? Like when T-Tar switches into Latios, it is unavoidable that you are going to be risking death from a crit. That's just the game that's played, and you can't not switch into T-Tar against Latios fearing a crit, because what else are you going to do? Switch into other Pokemon that die? So that's what I mean. Yes, T-Tar beats Latios without crits. No, you can't risk not getting... I mean, if you are so far ahead that you don't have to risk crits, then you wouldn't, obviously. I'm talking about in scenarios where you can't afford to guard against crits. It's like, yes, I have this beat unless it crits, and if it does, then, I mean, that's just what happens. there are scenarios like that. But if you are just content with blaming the game every time things don't go your way, then you're never going to get better. And you really have to look for every little instance of where something could have been improved upon, both in your play, not just in terms of positioning, but in terms of how you handle the RNG. So, and in general, when assessing other players, a lot of people are very ruthless, and I know a lot of it is about like social clicks and ego and dumb stuff like that, but stuff that's not related to the game anyway. But people can be really unfair in regards to it, and they're like, oh well, this guy got really lucky in this game. It's like, did he? You know, he was I'm making up examples now that are hypothetical, but just, you know, think about how much everything could change here. You know, if Tentacruel gets crit or way more likely burned, and this is why we try to manage the more RNG heavy aspects of the game. Like Moody is the best example, because that is just RNG. Or things like double team, you know, that's why we have evasion clause. That's why we have something like sleep clause in every gen pretty much, because besides Gen 5 where it's banned, but it's why we have sleep clause, because dealing with sleep is so powerful, and it's just, you know, RNG most of the time, including sleep talk. So it's best to limit it. You know, things like that. A lot of our tiering decisions are based around limiting heavy instances of RNG. Or let's go back to this one. Yeah, psychic critting or getting a sped F drop. First of all, neither of those two are particularly high odds on their own, and even when you just need one of the two, it's still not particularly high, but it does completely change the dynamic of that matchup if either does happen. So, Thunderous comes in, no hacks here, no hacks here, and I mean, look at all the RNG possible here. Draco Meteor could crit, but it could also miss, and either would be hugely significant. So now in comes Lando, which I think he doubles to, yeah, nice move, doubling to Thundo, and HP Ice doesn't. Okay, so now Draco missing critting. Here's another hugely significant example, because it's not about, you know, any one turn avoiding crit. It's about, and yes, it is frustrating when your opponent has a very limited chance to get some hacks and gets it. But again, that, like the Latios versus T-Tar example is a good one. But that's why we have to evaluate things like that when we're evaluating the game, and not just look at it from a purely fair weather perspective. It's also why something like best of 3 is so advocated for, because it helps the impact. It helps players play around the impact of these little things that always seem to pop up and ruin games. So now, look, any of these following Draco Meteors, you know, yeah, they're -2, and yeah, they can miss, but any one of them critting is huge. You know, critting Ferrothorn, that takes away a sacrifice. Critting Politoed, that means that Monai has lost 2 Pokemon. I mean, the Scald Burn is obviously helpful as well. That speaks for itself. And obviously that has a lot more, that has much better odds to take place. But, you know, just one of these 2 Draco Meteors critting, that would have, you know, I don't know if it would have changed the game necessarily, but it would have changed what goes on. This whole Power Whip into Scald thing, we won't even get into that. But this is why some players really don't like inaccurate moves, and so they don't like Pokemon that are forced to use inaccurate moves. Like, yeah, spamming consecutive Power Whips, if you need each of them to hit, it's not like you need one of 3 Power Whips to hit. You know, you have to hit consecutive Power Whips against a Pokemon that has very good odds of burning you. And this is why I don't like Scald, for example. The odds of getting 1 burn and 2 Scalds is 51%. You're favored for using this. You're already favored. I mean, slightly favored, but hey, that's still really good to have. You were favored after just 2 uses of this move that you get a million opportunities to use. So, and I'll spare you my rant for now about how warping this move is. But yeah, like, the odds for Ferrothorn are not good here. Actually, I guess this Ferrothorn could be Lumberry. I didn't consider that. Lumberry or Rostberry, which it runs to deal with burn. So, but if it's not, if it's Shed Shell instead or something, then yeah, hitting consecutive Power Whips against something that needs, I mean, yes, Power Whip can also crit, for sure. That's more significant than a Scald crit. So all I'm saying is look at, before you go calling something clean or hacksy or whatever, just look at the odds. And it really, Pokemon is very firmly a game about math. I mean, yes, there is obviously the positioning element, which is not just math. But if you really want to be technical, you could say that positioning is to get you a percentage of a win. When you double switch to Latios to get a free KO, you are not double switching to get a guaranteed free KO. You are double switching to get a free KO 90% of the time. Let's simplify it with Draco Meteor. Now, those are good odds, of course, and this is why Draco Meteor is good and why everyone hates Focus Blast, for example. But even Draco Meteor, when it misses, people go, oh, Draco Meteor shouldn't miss. It's like, well, as frustrating as it is, and yes, I agree that it is annoying that there's so much RNG in Pokemon. I don't think there needs to be so much of it. But unfortunately, that is the game. So, like, even this T-Tar thing, like, if we pretend that this is a different game, either of these two Surfs critting completely changes the matchup. I mean, it just, if the first one crits, then in a different game scenario, then T-Tar can at least switch out. But if the second one crits, then it just dies. So, protect, no hacks here, and then, yeah, even this could have crit, and then it could have crit the Thundurus, so that was my point. I hope it was made. If not, there is a comment section. Thank you for watching, and I hope this was helpful for you, and I will see you in the next one.